Shelly, look at all these green beans we got in the field today.
I know, it's green bean season, my favorite time of year, April.
You know, I remember when I was a kid, my mother asking me to come out on the porch and saying, let's go break some beans. And I remember all those nights canning green beans.
I think that's a pretty common family tradition because I did that too with my mom and my grandmother and my sister.
And you know what? A lot of people don't know how to pressure can green beans because you have to use a pressure canner. And that's one thing that we want to teach people, right?
Right, and so why would we have to use a pressure canner, April?
That's a great question, Shelly. Hi, I'm April Martin with UT Extension in DeKalb County.
And I'm Shelly Barnes with UT Extension in Wilson County.
And today we're going to go over the steps that you need to take to pressure can low acid foods. But before we get started, please take just a second and go down to the bottom where the subscribe button is at. Click that so you'll get more of our videos, and also give us a thumbs up. Let's go, Shelly.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so we're ready to start going through our supplies, and we have our green beans here. We've got our canning salt, and most importantly, we have our tested recipe that we're going to use. And green beans are a low acid food product. So in order to can these, April, we have to use what?
We have to use a pressure canner, and many of you may have used a water bath canner in the past for high acid foods, but when you have a low acid food product, which is basically anything except for tomatoes, any vegetable besides tomatoes, or any combination like a soup where you have a meat and anything besides tomatoes basically in it, you have to use a pressure canner just to ensure that you destroy all the microorganisms in it. So this is a pressure canner. Comes with a lid that screws on. It also has a canning rack that you put in the bottom, and this is just to keep the jars separated and to help it to not get so hot that they break and they're not right on the heat. And then the lids, there's two types of canners. This one has a dial gauge, so you'll see the number of pounds of pressure on there. And then there are some pressure canners that have weighted gauges, which I don't have those in this video, but they're just little weights that sit on top of your canner. And when you're following the recipe, it's really important to go by what the recipe says as far as the pounds of pressure, and that's why you have your dial gauge. So this is what you'll be canning with. You just put a little bit of water in it, and that's what we're going to be using today.
And in a lot of places in Middle Tennessee, it's really important to look at your altitude too, because we know that the higher we are, that might change our pounds of pressure that's recommended. So you can always contact your local county extension office to get information on what your elevation level is and see if the pounds of pressure is going to change for you.
Exactly. So some other items that are really helpful for you while you're canning include a spatula such as this, so that when your green beans are in your jar, you can kind of go around the edges and get all the air bubbles out. It just makes it a little bit prettier, especially if you're going to enter in the fair or something like that. So you want a spatula. You want a magnet, and this is really helpful when you have your lids, your rubber seal lids, being sanitized in boiling water. It's just real helpful to be able to pull them out so you don't get your fingers burned.
That's my favorite tool, April. That jar lifter.
Yes, this is,
or the lid lifter, excuse me, is my favorite tool.
And then you just want a regular spoon to be able to. Another item that is really helpful to have that we don't have with us today is a funnel, and you can get these funnels. You actually can get a lot of these products really inexpensively at the store. But there's a canning funnel that makes it really convenient so you don't make a mess, and put that on top of your jar when you're putting your product down in the jar.
And then we would use our ladle, right? When we do that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so we also have a jar lifter, and we would use these once the jars are filled with our food product and ready to go in the canner. Then we would pick them up this way so that we're not to disturb the food. And it's always also great when we're taking it out of the canner. These are going to be boiling hot jars, so we don't want to burn ourselves, and we can pick up and put down the jar very easily. And then another very important piece to our canning process is always going to be our jars, our glass canning jars, and our two-part canning lid system. So our flat and our ring, making sure that we're using those together and sealing those up properly.
You know, another important thing to mention, Shelley, about the jars is you always want to use jars that are specifically for canning, no mayonnaise jars or peanut butter jars or anything like
For
that.
craft jars too,
Yeah,
right?
because they're not designed, you know, for pressure canning. So make sure that you get some that are designed especially for canning.
And I get a lot of calls in the office as to why we can't use those. And I know that our food safety specialist always tells us the glass is not tempered properly and the glass jars could break inside of the canner, and whoa, what a mess that would be.
Right. Another important thing that I just thought of, if you have a dial gauge canner like this one, you do need to take it to your county extension office agent once a year to have this tested to ensure that the pressure is being measured accurately on that. So it's a good idea to do that once a year, and it's free.
Yes, and the best time to do that, I think, is either as soon as you're done with your canning season or right before you're about to begin. So that way we know for sure that your canner is ready to go.
Exactly. So, Shelley, I think we've got all our supplies together, and we can head over to the kitchen now and start canning.
Okay, sounds good. We'll
Okay.
meet you there.
You will need 2 to 3 inches in the bottom of the pressure canner, and that's different than a water bath canner. When you use a water bath canner, you need the water to cover 2 inches above the jars. But a pressure canner, since we're relying on pressure to reach the temperature that we need, we only need 2 to 3 inches. We're going to take our hot jars and put our green beans down inside, and it's really nice to use one of these funnels just to keep from making a mess around your work area. You want to fill it to within 1 inch of the top of the jar, and that's really important. If you overfill it, it can cause your cans to unseal, and then if you have it underfilled, you're just going to have a lot of wasted space, and your beans will not look as attractive. So this is a raw pack. With a raw pack, you're going to add hot boiling water to this till it covers it. Again, about 1 inch from the top. Now the other method is to use beans that are raw or that are hot packed. If you choose to do the hot pack method, you're going to put your beans in a pot and cover with hot boiling water and let that boil for 5 minutes. If you choose to, you can add 1 teaspoon of canning salt to each jar. And then you might want to take a spatula and just go around the edges of the jar. Just get all the air bubbles out, and this just leaves you a prettier product, and also it frees up some space sometimes to get a few more beans into the jar. And again, then we're going to add our sanitized rubber lids and the screw band and just tighten it finger tight. Now we're ready to go to the canner. All right, we have our jars of green beans ready to go into the canner now. And I strongly encourage you to purchase one of these jar lifters because they're actually safer. You know, you won't have to be lifting a hot jar with something else. It just protects you. So you're going to use your jar lifter, and then you're going to put that around each jar and lift down inside your pressure canner. Remember, you already have 2 to 3 inches in the bottom of your canner. And it's good to space these out just a little bit and not have them touching, just to prevent breakage. Next, we're going to take our canner lid and put that on top. And each device is different, but there'll be a place that you match up where to screw the lid on. Once you begin to see the steam coming out of the port on a steady, continuous steam coming out, then you're going to count for 10 minutes. This is a very important step to do before you actually start canning and counting your time. You should really see a good stream of steam coming out of the port. After the 10 minutes, you're going to put You're gonna tap it, and then you're gonna wait about 3 to 5 minutes for the canner to depressurize. Now this is very important. You're not going to start counting the processing time until you see this dial gauge reach the right number of pounds of pressure. And this is going to vary depending on your elevation. Where I live here in Tennessee, I'm under 2,000 feet. So my pounds that I need to reach is 11 pounds, and we're almost there. We have reached 11 pounds of pressure, and you'll need to adjust your fire to keep your gauge at about right at 11. And sometimes you may have to lower it or get it just right. Now, if you're using weighted gauges, you don't have to watch a dial. Just as soon as your canner starts jiggling, makes a jiggling noise, then that's when you start canning or start timing your processing time. And for where I live in Tennessee, I'm not at a very high altitude with 11 pounds of pressure, and I'm using quarts. It's going to be 25 minutes. And if you are using a dial gauge, you want to come back occasionally and just monitor, make sure that the pressure is not getting too high. You want it to stay right around 11 pounds. When the processing time is completed, you'll move your canner, you'll turn the eye of the stove off and move the canner off the heat. Do not try to force cool the canner with wet towels or anything like that. You're going to need, if you're using quarts in your canner for the recipe that I have, you're going to let this cool for 45 minutes. And with pints, you would let it cool for 30 minutes. You want to leave it as is and don't take the lid off. After the canner is depressurized, remove the weight from the vent port and wait 10 more minutes to unfasten the lid. After 10 minutes, you'll carefully remove the lid. So Shelly, I got finished canning my green beans. Would you like to see them?
Of course I would. Do I get to eat them tonight?
Well, actually, you need to not touch your green beans and disturb the jar for 24 hours after canning. But
that's right.
But I'm glad to show you what I got finished.
Oh my goodness, those are beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this video on canning green beans in a pressure canner. And we're going to put down in the comments the directions for how to do this, so if you want to follow along at home. And we have more videos coming to you with our Extension Explorer series on canning.
And don't forget to contact your local county extension office if you have questions about food preservation. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.